I'm going to go ahead and have this recorded as well. That way, anyone who couldn't find their way in, it will post to my website, and that way people can enjoy your reading. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Um, all right, I'm going to get started, and I will monitor the room to see if I need to invite people as they attempt to find their way here. Welcome everybody to a Common Sense Reading series featuring this afternoon's readers, Ariana Benson, Jessica Cuello, and Prairie Dalton. For those of you who are attending for the first time, I am Jordan Stempelman. I started the series back in 2011, went to an all online version during the pandemic, and then I kept the remote for the spring, and that way I could have writers who aren't necessarily here in the area or passing through to read for the series. And it's been wonderful to be able to archive these readings, which are available on my website. That's jordanstempelman.com. In the next couple days, I will archive this reading there as well. Just to let you know, there will be two more remote readings this spring. On March 30th, Ian U. Lockaby and Emily Stoddard will be reading for the series. And then Anthony Robinson, Michelle Transky, and Hillary Plum will be reading on April 27th. If you want to know more about the series, you can go to the Facebook page, which is just a Common Sense Reading series, and find me there. Or you can go to my Instagram feed, which is J_Stemps, STEMPS, and you can find me there as well. Before I introduce this afternoon's readers, please know there'll be a brief Q&A following the reading. So you can post any questions that you may have for today's readers in the chat, and I'll be sure to ask them on your behalf. And also, writers, if you have questions for each other, feel free to ask one another questions after we're done, after you're done with the reading. Again, normally I would talk behind the scenes about who wants to go first, second, third. I tend to do alphabetical order. I could do reverse alphabetical order. It's totally up to you. So what do you have a preference? No? So, okay, is it okay? Then we'll go in alphabetical order. All right, wonderful. Thank you for being so flexible. Okay, so our first reader is Ariana Benson. Ariana is a Southern Black eco-poet. Their debut collection, Black Pastoral, won the Cave Canem Poetry Prize. A Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellow, Benson has also received the Furious Flower Poetry Prize and the Graybeal Gowan Prize for Virginia Poets. Her poems and essays appear or are forthcoming in Poetry Magazine, Plowshares, Poem a Day, the Yale Review, the Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. Benson is a proud alumna of Spelman College, where she facilitates creative writing and storytelling workshops for HBCU students. Through her writing, she strives to fashion vignettes of Blackness that speak to its infinite depth and richness. Please welcome Ariana.
Thank you, Jordan. That's got to be one of my favorite readings of that intro. You hear it so many times, and yeah, I loved hearing it in your voice. That was wonderful. Thank you. Yes, hi everyone. So I am going to read some poems from my debut collection, as Jordan mentioned, Black Pastoral. It's a collection that thinks about the connections between Black Americans, Southernness in particular, and nature, the natural world, the landscape, flora, fauna, all those good things. And I'll start with the first poem in the book, which I believe technically the term for it is a proem. It's a prologue poem, and it's part of a suite of poems that I've entitled "Love Poem in the Black Field." And these poems are, as they sound, they're love poems that take place in various Black fields, whether that's literally as in fields inhabited or worked by Black people, but also figuratively as in the field of Blackness. And so this is the first one in the collection. Love Poem in the Black Field. And the epigraph reads, somewheres, some lifetimes ago. I have run so far, so long. There is nowhere I haven't been but here in this field, a body length from the ragged brink that gives way to forest. I collapsed here, the thin, hard slip of me whittled at both ends. I want badly to brave this aloneness now, as the hoofbeats swell like a whip welt around me, but I cannot. I weep for you. Clutch the hogweed, imagine it your wrist. Likewise, the stalks refuse to bend, even slightly, inside my balmy grasp. Oh, my saving grace, my heart's rest harrow, mere thought of you damns the plows that would have my head. When you arrive to pull me up from the mud, the salt will crumble from my eyes that for nights have seen nothing save that cardinal north from which the stars beckon, those stars that, like you, never fade from sight, even in the day blue sky. Then, for weeks, unspeaking, will follow their call, afraid to make more sound than does a mothling upon her first and final embrace with the open flame for which she confuses caged light. Such silence will we keep that I'll believe it is the river who thanks me for our crossing, and not you for waiting for me, you'll whisper, as if I have done you a kindness, as if my life is not one that began only when we met, as if I had not been dead and waiting for you before. I think I'll read one more of those. It was interesting kind of to explore different fields, different landscapes, different locations. I am from Virginia. And so that's a specific kind of South compared to maybe Georgia or Mississippi, for example. And so trying to research is a big part of my practice. And so trying to read a lot of firsthand accounts, historical documents, right, about what the fields were like all over. That this field, this poem takes place in Chesapeake, Virginia, 1891. Another love poem in the Blackfield. Listen. I did not mean to come to you empty-handed, to be yet another who only takes. My father taught me better than to milk dry what I cherish. I want to bring you my fists full of wildflowers, buttercups and loose strife, aster and thistle pure as wind. I paid the man at the riverbank. His cedarwood cart splintered by the brackish spray, his nail bed stained a deep blue that fades like shoreline into tan. I bought you a lush posy to hold while we watch schooners troll the swamp. But, darling, I've been an owned thing. I've been the orphan calf baying, been the birth dam hay cut and baled a few days before. I know we keep livestock for meat and hides, hens for their eggs, but is beauty enough reason to claim what once lived unpossessed? Please understand, I had to put them back in the dirt. I plucked their seeds with my teeth, spat them along the trail, felt each one crush under the stone of my heel as I walked here to you. I know that must sound mad. I hope I'm the kind of mad that makes you feel most whole. Think how, when we're sun-pruned and weary, we'll stroll here among the wayward blossoms. How right to love in a field of our own making. I think I'll read one more from that suite and then one or two more other ones. It's interesting. As a kid, I would definitely identify as more of a forest person. I was absolutely a tree climber, like could not pry me away from my favorite playground tree. Um, but something I've thought about and something that I think is one of the aims of my poetry is to kind of empathize or narrativize even history and current events. I think about the way that we talk about what's happening in the world today with numbers, this many people dead, this many miles destroyed, right? This much land gone. And, there's one way, that's one way to discuss it, but I think sometimes we often lose scale, right? And we often lose the gravity of what it means to lose one person, to gain one person. And so I think through my poetry, I'm trying to zoom in on those smaller human moments, right? So then we can understand what it really, really means when we're talking about the numbers and better kind of concretize the magnitude of what's going on in the world. So this love poem in the Blackfield is a bit more contemporary. It takes place in, as the epigraph says, the burning streets of America, 19th century, 20th century, 21st century. Love poem in the Blackfield. And what, my love, but the pasture? But the blades refusing to brown beneath this wintered march. What else in this world can still call itself living? Teach me how to consider the lilies, all they are because of, all they are despite. How you delight in their opening, a glacial flick like a snake's split tongue. I want, like you, not to seek the beast in every bud, to see a field of men as yet a field, black though it may be. But here I am, the wilt of the meadow, my young body already yellow with bitter spots. Show me what is untouched by the godless blue, what here was sown with any sense of grace. As we scrape raw our throats, crack our fists against the stealing air, the tear gas like crane flies ambling around dim porch lights drift slower, my flesh begs. What else but this suffering has made me worthy of your hands? As you turn my tears to milk, calm my lungs with purple aster as you wait till the remedy turns sweet enough to kiss from my lips, your breath answers, we are weed and flower both. Reminds me how we were soft once in his grasp, before the plow split our napes, before these iron barbs took root, and I am surer now of my ugliness, and sure that I love you because you don't try to make me unknow this truth. The sirens, the boots, they stampede on, but we alive because of, we alive despite. One more, I think I'll stick to this field theme, but this one poem is not a part of the suite. It's the last poem in the book. And as I'm sure a lot of poets do as well, I am a language nerd. And so one day I stumbled upon the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, and I thought, oh, I mean, what a resource, right, to write poems about. So I found this word, which this last poem is based off of. It's anemoia, which is nostalgia for a time you've never known. I just want to say thank you, Jordan, and thank you, Jessica and Prairie Moon. I'm so excited to be reading with you all and look forward to hearing your poems. Sweetfield Anemoia. There was, at one time, an empty field. I'm sure of it. Or was it a forest so jade that a vine snake's darting left only glare, like light breaking over rolling grain? No, there was a field because I miss it. Its brush languid as forest, sinking into jaded slumber, dragging floor dwellers at its outskirts like a tool train, the land trodden by what once bent its grasses with breath. God, what we could do without yesterday. Its forested jaundice, its sepia fog. With the prologue, we ourselves sowed a terrain thick with memory of unbodied lush, florid, a forest of stalks. Weeping, it shone like jade in the easy sun. Yes, there was warmth, sugarcane, a sweetness, or even just its thick simulacra. It whispered like sound in an adjacent forest, an aria unflattened by my failure to prove it real. Believe me, I'm sane, I swear. I remember the pasture, the soft sickle of a new leaf, each shoot its own forest, with only jaybirds and lacebugs coming between stems and their rain. Listen, I know this field. It never held a soul. No tree bark backs, no forest of bowed limbs, no blue jaws, no ambered over sores, only green thoughts, only the mundane. Thank you.
Ariana, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. That was great. Um, all right. Our second reader is Jessica Cuello. Jessica's most recent book is Yours Creature. Her book Liar, selected by Dorian Lau for the 2020 Barrow Street Book Prize, was honored with the Eugene Nasser Prize, the CNY Book Award, and a finalist nod for the Houstonic Book Award. Cuello is also the author of Hunt and Pricking. She's been awarded the 2022 Nina Riggs Poetry Prize, two CNY Book Awards, the 2016 Washington Prize, the New Letters Poetry Prize, a Saltonstall Fellowship, and the New Ohio Review Poetry Prize. She is poetry editor at the Tahoma Literary Review and teaches French in CNY. Please welcome Jessica Cuello.
Thank you so much, Jordan. This is, it's great to be here. Ariana, that was beautiful. I could have listened to you a lot longer. I don't think you read long enough. It was mesmerizing and soothing. And Prairie Moon, I look forward to hearing your work also. I'm going to read from my new book, Yours Creature. It came out in May last, so it's almost a year. And it's a series of epistolary poems in the voice of Mary Shelley, addressed to her mother, primarily the feminist and activist Mary Wollstonecraft. And some of the letters are to her creature, and some are to years. Dear Mother, I am threatened with a return of my girlish troubles, my arm covered red with scabs, my hand afloor at the abattoir. At night, the animal cry is the clock strike hour of sour milk. At noon, the swinging pig is ankles tied. In the 3 stories of the Skinner house, my stepmother is not you. Her latch on me is fixed, and I learn to regard myself with her repulsion, fixed to the mold in her domestic eye. My skin is a revolt. How can it not cry animal when she pulls my hair and knocks me down with longing for your presence? Mary Shelley. This one has an initial G in it, and G refers to her father, Godwin, who was a scholar. He's also the reason Percy Shelley appeared in their childhood home. Dear Mother, I watch G's fingers on the page, neck with a faint line, neck you loved, so I love it too. He is the glaze through which I see the sun. We call the goat's beard in our field sweet meadow, go to bed at noon, and wise father men. I touch the feathered heads to feel the god of it. At Chalk Farm, we drink the cream of syllabubs. Sister holds my arm, but I am the apple of his eye. I am the reader of his work. His frown can collapse my spine. His grief for you becomes a pillar my attention winds onto. Are you mad that I took your... G is mad with his glacial love and becomes more so despite my maniacal reading toward love. A child can kill its mother, baby wet and monstrous, slipping with eyes opened, black and white, the stewed creation, not asking to be born, but requiring M. This one has a quote from Coleridge. The cadaverous silence of Godwin's children is quite catacombs. Dear mother, silence was my pride, my object stillness, the quiet prize. My brain was a carnation on a stem, made my God of a father look at me. Quiet petals and silver pages, I meant to read until I was his perfect daughter, but P put one hand beneath my smock, and all the untouched years responded. Godwin had nothing to hold me with. I didn't know he'd snap me like a stem and toss me on a pile of exile. He was my God, first partner, the sun to my green tissue. He sent me letters with formal closings, as though I was still plicate in my room, leaf ribs pointed toward him, plumule hidden from all but him. Mother, you didn't raise me. Mary Shelley. This one has a quote from one of her letters. Of her 4 children, only one survived into adulthood. Dear mother, I had a dream that my little baby came to life again. What is it to make a life that dies? Like God, it cannot stand to stay. Cabbage leaves are soft like cloth and smell of tea. I wore them on my breasts like medicine. The earthy taste of tea made me hate my flesh. I didn't know if I was made of anything else. Her 13 days were the only time, and they had no measure. Clouds swirled like bands of twisted cloth. I'm sorry to burden you. As a child, I was spooked by the empty hall when Father moved us in. At first, he loved me like I was you, and in the dream, we rubbed it by the fire, and it lived. Yours as ever, Mary. Dear creature, P and I read each other's writings, and I am relieved a little of desire. The child said, some beings don't live long, pointing to the dragonfly. In my womb, the child moved beneath the skin and lifted the surface in the shape of an arm. I thought how the other children's arms were tucked in and never seen, an arm against a sack of blue. Once the hardness of my mind dropped to the womb. Creature, you opened each brain window, a God that jumped from ear to ear. Sometimes I listened for you when I touched P. You came with his voice. His hand could draw you. Dear creature, the sea of ice was my favorite distraction. We kept a squirrel inside a box who bit me. P carried him for a while, the way he carried kindness, useless and external, like a man. At night, when we read Christabel, P thought my nipples were eyes. He ran away afraid. I suppose each hole of my body is an eye, especially my mouth, repulsed by the heat of its need. Your monstrous creator, M.S. Dear mother, we rent a house in Italy. Black currants stain our fingerprints. We write in red, mother and child. My skin remembers P's glyptic touch, the sex we had beside your grave. When I was 15, his words were earnest like a slingshot. We gospelized you. I prepare fermented fish. The tiny blade lifts the bones like threads. P is a genius of wonder and invention. Not one domestic task takes his attention, and I in the kitchen am a genius of famine. Your loving daughter, Mary Shelley. I'm just going to read one poem from, I had two books come out so close together. So I'm going to read one poem from Lyre, which came out the previous year, which I do not recommend with books. Spread them out. My babysitter, Karen B., who was sent to Willard Asylum. There are only 2 photos of me as a child. She took them. She had no child. She had cool cigarettes and a job at the drugstore. She gave me the Crayola box with the built-in sharpener. 400 suitcases were stored in the attic of Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane. She joined her twin brother there. She wore her black hair down. A child could admire it. She bought me an Easter basket, a stuffed rabbit whose fur rubbed off. She walked everywhere. She painted circles of blush on her cheeks. Loony, people said so. I mean grown-ups who saw signs, who passed her on our street before she started to call and say, remember. On the phone, she said, remember. Remember the date we killed her brother, forgetting he'd been committed. I took her hand and tagged along like an animal. She was perfect to a child. In 1995, when the asylum closed, an artist took photos of the 400 suitcases. The photos were put online, the contents laid out respectfully. In the open suitcases, belts, pocket knives, Lone Ranger cards, keys, ribbons, shoe polish, mirrors, pills, a fountain pen, bottle of glycerin, a zither, kit of needles, bread ration card, the Gospel of John, a letter. Each suitcase had a name: Lena C., Lillian L., Mary T., Gloria P., Cassie M., Francis T., Marion R., Catherine S., Dimitri Z., Ruby C., Anthony C., FJL, Viola G., Alice T., Carrie L., Karen B. Remember. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Jessica. That was phenomenal. That was just phenomenal. This is great. I'm glad that I persevered here. I was a little panicked. I was like, oh no, this is not going to happen. How do I? Oh, I'm gonna have to reschedule and this. And I'm glad you all persevered with me on this because I really need this today, and this has just been wonderful. So our final reader today is Prairie Moon Dalton. Prairie is an Appalachian poet, born and raised in Western North Carolina, a 2020 Bucknell Fellow and a Neil Postman Award winner. Her work has appeared in Rattle, the Adroit Journal, the Allegheny Review, and elsewhere. And Prairie is currently pursuing an MFA at NC State University. Please welcome Prairie Moon Dalton. I think you're still muted. Hold on one second. Let's see. I can't hear you yet. Let's see. Try connecting to audio. Let's see if it works. Sometimes I can do it from my end, but it looks like I'm not allowed to. I can only ask you to unmute.
Is that any better?
Yes, that's perfect. You're back.
Sorry about that.
That's
I had
okay.
to get some help.
No.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you for your patience, and thank you, Jordan. It was wonderful to meet you at the so-and-so reading. And I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And how wonderful to be in such good company with Ariana and Jessica. Thank you so much. for starting off. I am currently working on my MFA at NC State University. Hopefully I'll graduate this year. I mean, hopefully as in I will. So I'm just going to be reading some selected poems from my thesis. I would love to have a first book. So yeah, if I could talk to you guys afterwards about ordering a book, I'd love to. But I'm actually going to start off also with a little bit. Yeah, I'm from Appalachia. It's a very important region to my history, to my poetics. I really yearn for more Appalachian poetry, and maybe I can fill that niche, I'm not sure. I'll start off with Mystery Hill. Want to see water flow up, leave a car out of gear, watch it roll toward the sky. A natural gravitational anomaly, the sharp curve sign says, but it's really just a quiet trick of the eye. I know that it was snowing, couldn't say if I was coming or going up the mountain or down. When I wrecked, I flipped. My buckled seatbelt sliced me deep across my gut, my chest, cut me but caught me, laid a red strip of film across my collarbone. It was night, and no one saw who hit me. No cameras, no footage. My word against nothing but 2 sets of tire tracks I couldn't have made. Maybe, the cops said, it didn't happen the way you thought it did. This is Hind Legs. Before Saturn could spin her rings, before anyone could call anything by its wrong name, before nothing but salt and silt sat on the bottom of lakes, before lakes or creeks or reservoirs, before long throats of rivers that swallow what we love, before what we love, before what would make me tucked itself inside the rocks, before the rocks, before I had limbs, before I had many, before I had 4, before I wore my mother's hard face or any face at all, before the sky was a tarp stretched taut and the sun rolled right off like a marble. I tend to write really short poems, and I think until my MFA, I thought that was a shortcoming or something I had to fix. But through the fantastic guidance of Meg Day, Eduardo Corral, they've really taught me how to define my own poetics. And I've found that really what I'm interested in is the economy of language. I grew up very, very poor, very lower class in deep Appalachia, and there's very little access to resources there. I'll talk more about that. But very rarely do you get a chance to speak, I suppose. And when you do, you need to make your words count. And I think that's what's drawn me towards poetry, because we all know that we have to make our words count on the page. So yeah, I'll continue with Bait. A fish doesn't cry when you catch it, but my brother sobs every time I hook a worm. I make him watch me thread the writhing thing like a sewing needle. All day I wait for a bite, for ripples to match the shudder of his shoulders. Here it is, born from the lake. Pierced mouth and scales glinting like spilled change. I cut it from the line and hand it over. Here, I tell him, hold it before I throw it back. Carolina in January. If you get hungry enough, you'll eat a rabbit, but we never did. Instead, she found us a cold cotton mouth, as nicely for its wasted skin. She said we could split it, diamond bracelets for both of us. When Carolina pierced my ears, she sang, held a cotton ball to catch the needle and a pinch of first snow to numb me. Like a magic trick, I could not see her hands when she slid these gems into my head. She is part of me. Which part? She took her eyes and left me nothing but her keys on the table, and that day frozen as this one. This is a series of poems I'm doing called the Notice series. So notices to appear, notice to vacate, very brief poems in which I'm interested in how just a few words can be extremely life-altering to your livelihood. So this is one of them. This is called Notice to Appear. A day late and $1 short. I'm the devil because I want something different. I blew on a cockroach thinking it was a feather, stomped a feather thinking it was a spider. I love how you look for a fight, how you catch a run in every pair of pantyhose. Why does the speed gauge go to 140? Good luck finding us. We left nothing but naked light bulbs and shoes stained with blood. Communion. I'm a mosquito's first choice. In July dusk, you can find me scratching myself raw, using my thumbnail to press a cross into every soft well. I know God made these bugs too, and all of us have to eat. So every summer night, I bite my tongue and spit blood all over the porch rails, and once in a while, I let them slip straight from my ankles and watch as they go full and dizzy on me in the floodlights. Only child. You weren't even there until you were just a dark clump on the shower drain, plucked from nothing and rinsed with the rest of my blood. 18 and on the way out, and I'd raised enough, brushed enough hair, wiped enough mouths, fed and hushed and rocked and carried off to bed. A sleeping child is not still. Their sticky bodies kick and thrash through the night. When I was a girl, I bit too far into an apple and swallowed its one black seed. I've half dreamt you standing in my doorway, dragging your shadow behind you like a blanket. Tombstoning. She found a femur on the shore, held it against her own leg, asked me what walks like us, what stands as tall as you and I. I don't know. I know that if God let me choose the sea and sky, I wouldn't have picked blue for both. She says heaven sent us back, a reverse rapture. Two girls gargled like salt water and spit onto the rocks. If anyone needs me, I'll be here, clinging. My bikini double tied, lashes blonde, and shins grinding against the precipice. I tell her if we lie down and wait long enough, this same sun will bleach our bones and turn us smooth too. She tells me to jump. This is a last one I'll do. This is another one of the notices. This is notice to vacate. This isn't an eviction, it's an erasure. You know, we were supposed to have 7 days, 6 if you count today. Go grab your brother, the tin of cash, my slip off clothesline. Leave the dogs. I'll come with you, but you're gonna have to talk. I can't help this gun in my mouth, can't help when I speak, only shots ring out. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Prairie. That was wonderful. I want to invite everyone to put any questions they have into the chat. I will go ahead and let's see, add some spotlights here of our readers. One thing I just want to say first and foremost is, we lost a great poet this week, Lynn Hygenian. And Lynn was a major influence on my life. Not only, her writings about poetics, her idea of community, and that being the essential aspect of poetry. of capturing narratives and stories and histories. But I just want to say that, hearing that, and it's such a loss for poetry, and then to hear you all read, uh, to know that poetry's in really good shape. There's something there to know that you all are definitely carrying on what Lynn had done so well for so long, and you all, you know, God willing, have so many years ahead of you to do it too. So this is just wonderful and very healing to hear. Um, there's one question that's in the chat. I have some too. So let's start with the chat here, and you all can answer however you want to. You can come in however you want to. So the question is from Marley Bunch. This is a question for you, Ariana. Can you share some background or a story about the Great Dismal Swamp, and how you merge Black history and ancestry, both that tragic and celebratory in your writing? That's a great question because yeah, I felt that swirl all together as this very kind of well, magnificent whole telling.
Yeah, thank you, Marley. That is a great question. Yes, so I am from the part of Virginia that is located really in the heart of the Great Dismal Swamp. It is a big, literally tract of land that is swampish, very hard to navigate, full of still bears and jaguars and snakes and every creature that you don't see in the more urbanized areas of where I'm from. And it is also a place that holds a lot of historical significance, especially as a descendant of slaves, because it was a space where Maroons or escaped slaves would actually hide and then create communities. And because it was so literally dismal and full of bugs and treachery, the catchers would not go into the swamp to catch them. And so it was a place of community. It was also a place of exchange with indigenous peoples among the Maroons. And so it was kind of a hellish haven, and it's a really important place for me as well because I grew up on Moses Grandy Trail, which is a long road that goes through the swamp. And Moses Grandy was a man who was enslaved and lived in the swamp and carved it out and turned it into this place of commerce, right? And so, literally growing up in this history and in that kind of place of oxymoronish, again, like our oxymoronic, like heaven and hell, I think was a big inspiration for some of the larger concepts of Black pastoral as a whole. Like, how can this place that some would describe as dismal, as torturous to inhabit, also be a place of haven and safety and freedom? And I didn't read the poem, but there's a poem in Black pastoral that is in the voice of the swamp to Moses Grandy. It's a love letter, and in it, there's an epigraph that Moses Grandy is from his actual slave narrative, and he said at one point that he would not have left the swamp to go to heaven itself. And so that just kind of got me thinking about the ways that we think about the field, even trees, right? Particularly as, again, a Black Southerner, there are all these rightfully negative connotations, right? We think about the brutality, we think about the suffering, but also I wanted to kind of investigate the love, right? And the kind of connection that existed there, the community that existed in these spaces that I know existed because I'm a product of that love. I'm a product of that connection and community. And so finding a way through poems to hold both that brutality and ugliness and that love and beauty in our hands at once is kind of my aim with this collection and with really all the poems that I write.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear you say it that way. I'm thinking about how great your work would pair with like Harriet Mullen's Urban Tumbleweed, of that type of, in the cityscape versus going into that fieldscape as well.
I
Something
honor, I love Harriet Mullen.
so yeah, amazing. And that work is so wonderful, moving through space and time. And so I have a question for all of you. And I loved the quote that you had, or the section you had in your poem, Ariana, or maybe you said this was like a preamble to the poem. You're looking to empathize or narrativize history, the gravity apart from the statistics. So I know, Jessica, you include research in there, but then I think about, research, the poem often just researches us, as we're writing it. It's almost like taking stock or inventory of us as well. And that's its own thing. But I want to hear from you all the way that, research, how you combine the two, how you combine, the stories of others with this story of the poem itself, or you within that space, or you as the narrator or the speaker with it. How is it that you find a way to kind of make that cohere? Or is there a process? Do you do the research first? Or do you do both at the same time and kind of riff off one another? So I'm really curious to hear about that. And then, and this goes towards your work too, Prairie, if it comes from, your experiences in Appalachia as well, how you kind of bring that in and fold it into the work.
I can talk a little bit because the Shelley book is actually my third book of persona poems. And I actually began it as a distraction by accident. I was working on something else and I was reading this dual biography by Charlotte Gordon that alternated between the mother and the daughter. And it was so stimulating that I just started writing these poems. And then I realized there was a book there. So then I went and got like another 8 biographies of Shelley. And then I started rereading some of her work I had missed. And then I read some of Mary Wollstonecraft's work that I had never read. Like she has this book where she travels through Sweden by herself with her infant. She was unmarried, chasing this ship through Scandinavia. And then as you said about the poems, I think you said the poems writing you. I don't know. I thought I was drawn to the mother-daughter relationship, but then the more I wrote the poems, I realized I was writing into the idea of being born as monstrous and being rejected by the family, or or killing your family, being so monstrous. But I didn't even know that until I got to the end of the book. But I think it's like a painful concept, and when I pursue a persona, it's a way to kind of contain the emotion that overflows. So
And would you say research is it allows for that as well, like a containment for the emotion, or the distance for the emotion?
I mean, I'm a public school teacher, and so I don't even view myself as doing research. I feel like that's for the academics. I just read. So maybe that's research, but I just read a lot of books, but it's so haphazard and I'm just pursuing my obsessions. So I feel like it's not legitimate research.
Oh, I think it very much is. I think it very much is. Um, Ariana or Prairie, any thoughts about how research functions in your work, or the way in which the process in which you then start to fold the research in, or bring something away from yourself into the poem so it encounters yourself, things of that nature?
Well, I can say, yeah, it's my first book is one that is definitely very, very heavily kind of entrenched in history and historical events, and other folks' narrative, and that's often really where I pull. So I would say, if it's not like formal research, often I'm pulling other folks' direct words or quotes, and then writing kind of into the world that I can surmise was existed or did exist, that they spoke that language into, if that makes sense. And I'm really glad that Jessica, you brought up persona, because there are a lot of persona poems in this book, and there are a lot of persona poems that are actually in the language of the land, the swamp, the trees, etc. And I kind of did that because, like you said, like research isn't perfect, especially I wouldn't call myself an academic. And quite frankly, as much as I can have a closeness to these experiences, right, as somebody who is history, as a descendant of these experiences, they're not mine. I didn't work the fields, right? I don't know what that was like. But so if I can't literally then imagine that experience, I do know about love, and I can write about what love might have existed in that context. I can speak from the voice of a tree, right? And kind of imagine, right, what a tree might have seen, what a blade of grass might have seen, right? And so in that way, it's kind of, I start with finding a fact, finding a voice, finding a real person. But then it often leads me to find a perspective or find a way in through something that I understand or that I can imagine. And then the marriage of those things usually leads to a draft of sorts.
Yeah, I think you phrased that wonderfully, and that's how I feel, especially the last part about finding, um, that point of connection in something that's maybe more separate from you. Well, I would definitely say that I don't do research, or I'm not really on the scholarly side of things, at least not yet. Um, it's largely from my own experiences, but also I really love to interrogate the older people in my family. And so that's also where a lot of my stories come from, and they're not verbatim. They're very heavily mythologized, as is a lot of stuff in Southern culture. But I try to take the points, the stories that I glean from um, family members living and dead, and find a connection point in my life, and then a connection point to the land. I would say, so maybe research in that sense, I suppose.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question that I think is a follow-up to that. I mean, Prairie, you mentioned this idea of, you know, feeling as if very rarely were you given the opportunity to speak. And I think about, one of the essays that I always start with when I teach my writing seminar course with first year students is Audre Lorde's The Transformation of Silence into Language. And, you can remain silent all your life, and yet it won't take away from what's there. And so I think about the idea of like the economy of language. And when it comes to how you then revise, one of the things that so there's a couple of students in the reading today, and we're going to revisit revision or talk about revision this week. And what are some of the strategies in how you find that economy? And I think every poet is looking for some type of economy, even if you're working in forms of expansion, even if it feels expansive, like a long poem. I'm sure there's a ton of revision. It's not Ginsbergian, first thought, best thought. I mean, maybe some people can do that, but I'm not one of them, and I don't know a lot of poets who are that way either, where they just leave everything out there. So what are some strategies that you all have for revising? What are some of the things that really work for you that you find to be successful? Or maybe just because I know it can be book to book to book. So it could just be, well, it works, this strategy works this time, and then you try it again, and it's like, oh, that didn't work. Is there something that you found either with what you read today that was like an innovative revision strategy, or one that tends to be successful for you all time and time again?
I went last time, so I'll go first. Something that's helpful for me is changing formats on every draft. So if I begin on the page, I try to write the last. I go from the page to writing it from memory onto a Google document, or vice versa. If I begin on a Google Doc, I try from memory to write it a second time on the page. And then when I go from the page, I go back to a Google document, and I'm only keeping what I can remember, because if I don't remember it, it clearly wasn't good enough.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That was the workshop story method when I went to undergraduate at Columbia in Chicago. It was all about, you would just tell. There was no Iowa workshop. It was just like, okay, so what's happening is there's a little girl who like really wants an ice cream cone, but her mom's on the phone talking, and that would be the part of the story. And if people in the class remembered what you'd read in real time, you knew that's what you'd keep. And it was a really cool workshopping method, about retention and about the magnificence of the prose, or the action of the prose. So anyway, that's a fascinating. I've never heard that one before when it comes to poets. Um, let's go. This is my list down. Ariana, and then Jessica.
Yeah, I love that, Prairie. I'm gonna have to try that. I think I have a rather kind of specific, especially if I'm writing not in a prescriptive form. It changes a little bit if I'm writing in form, but I think I kind of have a rather specific process. And so my revision is a very important, I guess, step of that process. So it usually happens one way. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I draft in prose. And then revision looks like for me breaking the lines. I'm someone who heavily privileges the integrity of a single line, the power of it, how it moves in its own context, as well as in the context of the language around it. I also really love a strong enjambment. I love when I can break on a verb and the, language, the noun that it's modifying or applying to after is a complete surprise. So often the revision looks like for me breaking the lines where I think those enjambments or the single line might be the strongest, and then kind of pouring the poem into different containers. It's cool, Prairie, that you're at North Carolina State, because this is something that I learned from Eduardo. He talks about pouring the poem into different containers like a liquid. So I'll try different line lengths. I'll try, different kind of stanza forms, but usually it's starting in prose and then finding the right kind of lines that make up the poem, because I find that a poem for me is a constellation of moments, and so I really want the powerful moments to be the ones that kind of shine the brightest, but also the subtler moments to create the shape of the poem that illuminates the night sky, to complete the metaphor.
No, that's great. I love that idea of moments and how you don't want those other moments to be overshadowed or seem like they're not up to par with the others. They feed into or they lead out of those moments. That's great. That's really wonderful. Jessica, how about you?
I love that too. I love what both of you said. For me, it really has been different for each book. Each book has sort of dictated a completely different process, and I try to surrender to whatever that is. In this book, because it was epistolary, it was very internal. It was very much in my head. I didn't say anything aloud as I was writing. Some of them I hadn't read aloud until I did the first reading, which I know is a faux pas. You're not supposed to do that, but it was very much this idea of speaking to the dead and speech that couldn't be shared that was motivating the book. And so they were written in multiple. I'm old fashioned, old school, so I still write by hand, and I usually have like multiple notebooks by my bed, and then I fill them, and then I am also kind of a I slash, I will write for this book. I probably wrote 10 times more than what actually went into the book. And then I end up rejecting. So I may write 10 poems and then I take one and then I'll go back and revise the one, but I will just keep the material coming until I have enough that feels like it's got some, it's reverberating, it's got some gold inside it. Even when I was in the final edits and it was ready to publish, I took out 5 poems. At the very, I just took them out. So I'm kind of a ruthless editor, but I write a lot, and then I hope there'll be something. Something.
Are you as ruthless as like I remember Harry Crews talking about just an amateur keeps it and the real professional throws it in the fire. Which so like do you actually like delete or ball up and throw away, or do you recycle? Like
I cycle. Well, I mean, literally recycle in the recycling bin. I I did it. It's weird. When I finished this book, I also took all of my journals and notebooks that had been in my closet for years, and I emptied all of them into the bin. And I thought, like, when I saw them there, I thought, oh, is there something there I'm going to need? And then I just felt this relief, because I think as you get older, you start to feel really burdened by your past scribblings and all of your thoughts and feelings. And I felt like I needed to be free of them. And the book contained so many of these fraught emotions, even though it's this historical. So I put them all in the recycling bin. And my husband said, he's like, you may really regret throwing out your 20-year-old journal, but I haven't at all. Like I love to just purge and like I like just getting rid of my stuff too. So,
Oh, that's wonderful. I've done that with journals in the past just because it was so embarrassing. And then I keep certain documents or keep certain lines. I'll keep line if I pull lines out, I'll throw them into kind of just one file, this endless scrolling file, just to see if there's anything there when I feel like I can't begin from nothing or something. Um, okay, so I've got one more question for you all. I don't see any more in the chat, but I've got one that I started during the pandemic, which was, at a time when we were all just kind of trying to just get through the next hour or the next day or whatever. But I still think it's an important question to ask, which is about joy, which is about, is there something that you have seen or read or made that has brought you joy recently? So it could be a recipe, it could be a podcast episode, it could be one single poem. You don't have to limit it to one. It could be, two or three things. Is there something that you would like to share with other people? I'm always sharing things to my group of friends, like read this or check this out or whatever, just out of just this exuberance. Is there something like that that you've shared recently or you've just been dying to share that you want other people to enjoy that might bring them joy? So that's how that's used
Um,
this question. So
No, yeah, I can go first. My answer is pretty simple. Last night, me and my brother went to go see the Demon Slayer movie. It's anime. And I feel like anime is the thing that most consistently brings me joy. Actually have an essay, my first essay about it, in the Kenyan Review recently about how really anime, even though it's not visually representative necessarily of the Black experience, it story-wise, I related to it so much as a kid because there's often the underdog, and there's a way that, community comes together and problems are solved like internally, and there's all this teamwork and just so it was a lot. It was important for me as a kid, anime, and I think, often just that kind of hero's journey and that triumph of over all the obstacles is something that brings me a really simple, release of joy. And I just wanted to say too quickly, because you mentioned the pandemic, um, poetry was the thing that brought me joy in the pandemic. And actually, it was when I started taking it seriously, started writing Black Pastoral, and my first workshop and community event that I ever attended was the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. And Jessica, you were one of the featured poets that year. And so I've been like following your work since then.
that is wonderful. Joy. Who wants to go next?
I can talk about joy. I think this has been a really hard year, I think, for so many of us, but I also had more joy than I've had in my entire life, which I think speaks to being in your 50s. It's the happiest decade I've ever had. Um, and there's no reason for the joy that I've had. I'll just be lying on my couch after working all day and I'll just feel happy. Um, and I think that's just like pursuing your creative work and being true to yourself. It pays off. It took me a really long time. Like I published very late, and that's why I had so many books close together. But when I disappeared, I went to grab a book that I've been reading, because it's kind of incredible book. Um, I don't even know how to pronounce his name because I haven't heard him speak, but it's Gayeth Almadoun. It's Adrenaline, and I started reading this book this week, and it's the poem. He's a Palestinian poet, and he lives in, I think, Stockholm, but the poems are just, and they're dark, but they're sexy and they're loving and they're startling and surreal. And it's such a beautiful book. And the joy is not the content particularly, but the joy is when you read a book and it, takes the top of your head and you're so excited again. And I mean, I read a lot of good poets, but I read this book and I thought, oh my God, this book is so great. And it's just such an exciting feeling when you discover it's when you discover a poet that you love and you've never heard of this poet before. And so I highly recommend it because the writing is beautiful. It's translated by Catherine. I can't even read. Cobham in its action books. So,
Action book. That's what it looked like, an action book.
action books, yeah,
They do such great translation work, and
they do.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. Prairie, what can you pass along on the joy train here?
I I've been feeling very joyful about finishing my thesis. One, I'm a procrastinator, so I like to wait till things get to a full count before I complete it. But beyond that, I've just been very lucky to have a very good cohort, a very distinct cohort, in that each of us has our own poetics and own style, and just getting to read their theses as they finish them, and kind of all go through this together. Just my master's program in general has been very wonderful, and I know it's strange to say restorative, but it has been in showing me that there is a life in words, especially I'm a first generation college student, never dreamed that I would be going to master's school, let alone an MFA program. It's all seems like a luxury, and it really is. But just getting to have that community with fellow writers, I really do not take it for granted.
No, that's great. I'm glad you have that feeling too. I had that feeling in graduate school as well, where I met some of the best readers of my work, and some of the closest friends as well. I know it's really easy uh, to kind of hammer on MFA programs and the MFA industrial complex and all that, but still, it's a place where, you're around people who, for the most part, are very serious about writing, um, and you can find some good readers. You can find some really good readers of your work. I just want to say thank you so much again for sticking with this mishigas, as my mom would say, the chaos of me trying to find a workaround from that dead link. And so I apologize. There was, many more people who I'm sure they hit that dead link. So I apologize for there not being as many people that I know wanted to be here. So if you know those people, and I post that link, please invite them to listen in, because it's such a glorious reading that you all gave, and I really appreciate your time and all you're doing for poetry. This was really great. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who found their way here, and have a great rest of your day. I love these 3 o'clock readings because now I've got the energy that you've given me to take it forward instead of right to the pillow. So
Thank you so much, Jordan.
Thank you so much, everyone.
You're a lovely host.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, this was wonderful.
Really nice to meet you.
thank you, and I hope to meet you in
Yes.
person sometime soon. I know were you all in Kansas City recently for the AWP thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I was not.
Oh, you weren't there. Oh, it was
No, next year.
Okay. Well, I hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Thank you
All right.
guys.
That would be great.
Take care, everyone. Have a good
Bye.
rest of your day. Bye-bye.